Welcome to the CTO2CTO podcast, where Chief Technology Officers dig into the challenges and opportunities that leaders face every day at the intersection of business and innovation. I'm your host, Lucas Hendrich, CTO at Forte Group.
Welcome to the CTO2CTO podcast. I'm your host, Lucas Hendrich, CTO of Forte Group. Today, I have the extreme pleasure of having Leon Kuperman with us to have a conversation about Cast AI and other things. He is the CTO of Cast AI. I'm going to see if I can get this right or make this understandable for our maybe less technical business viewers and listeners. Cast AI is a cloud optimization solution that orchestrates Kubernetes loads in hybrid cloud environments in order to reduce cloud costs. And so, tell me what's missing there.
First of all, Lucas, thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate. Looking forward to a fun conversation. So, when you promote a product like ours, there's the direct, immediate, what I'll call ROI-driven benefit, and I think you recited that benefit really well. So, one of the great outcomes of our platform is it does reduce costs. I think the bigger reason for being, if you will, is I'll kind of give you our, that start with why statement. Like, if you probably have seen it a million times, TED Talk from like 15 years ago or whatever it was. We went through this exercise to really understand the core reason for our platform, and I'll kind of lay it out for you. It'll make a little bit more sense. So we believe that software powers the world, which I think being a CTO, you'll agree with, and that we exist to make our customers' software better, faster, cheaper, more resilient, more secure. We do that through automation. Because we believe there aren't going to be enough humans to drive all of the software, evolution that is coming in the next decade or two. People think that AI is going to take all the software jobs. I think the opposite is true. There's going to be such an explosion of software projects that, yes, AI will be an accelerant, but it's going to be a great place to work and an interesting place to work over the next kind of couple decades. We happen to start our journey with Kubernetes because it has rules of engagement. It's a very structured orchestration platform. But now you'll see that we've expanded our product line into AI enablement through database optimization. We basically believe that any area of software that can be automated at the lowest level should be automated to allow humans to elevate their participation in that software development lifecycle and solve the hardest problems, not the low-level grunt problems, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. And it confirms a point of view that, I express pretty uniformly on this podcast, which is that, there's two views. There are kind of two general views of the world when it comes to AI and automation. And there's the scarcity view that we'll, automate ourselves out of jobs. And that creates a lot of fear, and people react based on fear. And then there's, the growth view, which is really, demand side view, which is that all of this automation is just going to increase the demand for more interesting projects. And another way I think about it is by automating, let's say those low to mid-level tasks that don't require much cognitive lift, imagine all of the cognitive space we're opening up, which I think is still unique to humans, how humans solve problems, which are essentially human problems, not machine problems. I think it's going to spur, and platforms like yours are going to, liberate us in a way to be able to tackle harder problems.
Yeah. The way I look at it is like, what's the number one downfall of most software projects? And I kind of have two buckets that I like to frame the thought around. One is technical debt. So it's measured in velocity. If you stop releasing your code, you're on a death march.
Yeah.
So people think that releasing code less frequently is a safer approach. It's actually a much more dangerous approach. The phrase I use is the antidote to change is more change. Like, go faster. That means you have to have the rails to go fast. That means you have to have the test structures to go fast. It means everything has to be automated. So like at Cast, we release hundreds of times a day our core platform. When legacy or when more enterprise customers ask us, tell us your change schedule. Well, I can't. There's no versioning. The software is continuous and it happens 24/7. So velocity and technical debt is kind of one big bucket of issue that we try to solve through automation. And engineering culture is really the second. Now, we can help with engineering culture indirectly, but fundamentally that comes from human leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
The way you think about engineering problems, the way you think about how engineers or software engineers should interact with those problems starts at the top, but it's a grassroots movement. Like if your engineers don't believe what you believe, you will have a dysfunctional team.
Mm-hmm. No, I love thinking about belief too, because there's I won't be able to cite where I read this, but something very interesting about how code is actually a belief system. Like everything you do in a product starts with a set of core beliefs, which really creates a whole kind of reality. As far as your engineering teams go, though, so that said, how have you adjusted in the last year or two for all of the potential productivity gains and the potential risks to productivity through generative AI and specifically in code creation?
So we have left a very open policy for our engineers. They don't have to use OpenAI. They don't have to use Claude. They don't have to use JetBrains. So there's a plethora of tools in the environment, and that's very purposeful. In fact, we asked them to go buy their own license, which we're probably going to have to change for compliance reasons. But so far, in early days, just go buy the licenses you want, play with what you want to play with, and see where you get to. And I see really two camps. I see folks that are highly skeptical and still believe that this is handcrafted art. And I have my opinion on what's going to happen with those folks. And by the way, age isn't necessarily a good correlation signal to that belief system. Right? I find it highly uncorrelated right now, at least right now. And then there's a second set of folks that are leaning in more, still skeptical, but highly curious and playing at the edge. Now, my team is mostly in the Baltics and Poland. We'll call it roughly Eastern Europe. They already come to the table with a highly skeptical mentality through hundreds of years of whatever their history that they've lived. So battling that even so mentality is kind of my internal challenge, but I think we're getting there. We just did performance reviews like literally last week, and I was doing some one-on-ones with some of my engineering managers, and I'm asking that same question. Who is adopting? Who is stagnating? And one of our rockstar EMs, Yolanta, actually, she said to me, look, Leon, I think it's a self-solving problem. Because as a non-AI assisted engineer, let's call it that, you might have a couple of great rockstar days. You might be, on the moon for a couple of days, but eventually energy levels have to come back to normal. And so what you see is people who've dialed in their prompt engineering capabilities, their ability to with Cursor, Windsurf, or JetBrains, whatever idea of choice, with that great and fluid prompt engineering, have consistently outpaced handcrafted engineers. And so her perspective is going to be a self-selection problem. Like eventually, through performance management, we're going to see it clearly. Yeah. It's not something we have to force.
Yeah. No, I think it's the analogy I think about is, or I use a lot is, you can make candles and be very good at making candles, but you're not going to light your house with candles all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it was Mark Andreessen that compared, maybe I'm wrong, someone could fact check me, but compared, maybe it was Andrew Ng, AI to the new electricity. And the use of AI, I think, is going to be so pervasive and ubiquitous that at a certain point, I don't even think it'll be considered AI anymore. I think there's a lot of talk about AGI and sort of this big, singularity moment or something where the tools are good enough now to do so many things that I'm almost like not interested in what the next benchmark is.
Yeah.
because the utility is so clear and it's becoming so pervasive that it's almost more of a way of working shift that's going to have a long tail to really bring its way around into beyond software development. And
that is true. I mean, it's such a useful tool for so many different applications. Do you think, Lucas, we're going to see a kind of a flatlining moment or a deceleration of progress where people are saying, look, why do I need to pay $700 for a model when the $20 model is just fine?
I think it's already happening.
Yeah.
And I think, again, there's AI has always been kind of a loaded term, that has so much cinema associated with it that there'll just be an acceptance of things. The same way that Excel is ubiquitous everywhere, using LLMs is becoming ubiquitous everywhere.
Yeah, I never really because I've been studying machine learning for probably like half my career. So other than outside of college, first machine learning courses weren't nearly the techniques we use today. But in the last couple of startups, ML has been a big part of our ethos. And when this transformer model with attention came on the scene, I'm like, cool, another neural network that is really good at language processing. I guess the leap was the outcome for folks that were not big students of machine learning before. For me, this is all just a machine learning problem. It's a prediction problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm loving the fact that we're here at this point in history because we have so much good we can generate with the capacity that's been unlocked. Do you use higher end professional models? Like I use the GPT Pro subscription. Mm-hmm. And I'd argue if there was a higher tier, I would probably pay for it. Because for me, it's a game changer in the way I work.
No, absolutely. And and it's a constant challenge in a sense to evaluate, because again, the use case for me doesn't. I'm not doing math Olympian problems on a day-to-day basis. I'm doing some hard problem solving, but it's usually ideation. Strategic. It's incorporating, a corpus of knowledge that's just beyond, my own gray matter. And most models foundational models do relatively well at all. It comes down to style and nuance in some ways.
So I think there's stickiness, and I'll explain. I was just thinking about why don't I use Grok where others do? Why don't I use Gemini, which I really don't like the experience. And I think I have an understanding why, but I want to go back to your point on the benchmarks. Mm-hmm. The benchmarks are a little bit BS in keeping it clean because nobody works like that in a clean room environment where it's just the model weights that count.
Right. It's
the model weights plus the MCP server plus the tools that are available to agentic workflows that combine to create an outcome. I don't necessarily care if a model has all of its knowledge embedded in its weights. In fact, the more it has embedded, that's kind of extra dead weight, if you will, the slower it's going to be from a token generation perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it creates dead weight loss. Absolutely. And the utility of the foundational model is really just handling the natural language component, which, again, going back to that sort of higher level utility, how much easier is it to just ask a question to your data where you don't care where it is and get a response than to direct a user to use some business intelligence tool, go to SharePoint, go somewhere, find something, write this query. That little leap of natural language processing is so huge.
Yeah. And that's why, so I think there's a million business use cases. But code is the perfect, and I think the reason why LLMs and reasoning models have been so pervasive with code is it's just the language. Essentially, it's a language problem, and these models understand Go, Python, and Java extremely well.
Yeah.
They have a huge corpus of learning.
Now, in the solutions that you provide with Cast AI, obviously those predate the big boom of the last 2 years with Gen AI. And one thing that I observe is this kind of overall, which is normal with any big advance in technology. There's a lot of buzz generated, a lot of noise, and people don't really understand what they're talking about at a certain level, a certain layer of abstraction. So when people ask you, how is your product AI driven? Do they tend to, are they asking the question from the point of the recent sort of mental model of Gen AI, or are they embracing, what you've been doing in machine learning? Because there is, a dichotomy between deterministic and non-deterministic. And it's my belief that a lot of people asking the questions don't really have a fundamental technical understanding of what they mean by AI.
So we actually state very clearly for our core products that we do not use LLMs, or we'll call them foundational models, although a little bit is scripted, and I'll explain where, because it's a procurement nightmare. I don't want to get into, already a complex sales cycle where people are buying automation and there's already internal personas. Will this work for our use case? There's just overall resistance to automation in some circles in general.
Or just leveraging a subscription solution in a large enterprise is a huge challenge.
There's a procurement lift, there's a compliance and security lift, all of those things are true. So we actually state fundamentally that when you buy our core product, these 3 SKUs or 4 SKUs, we do not use large language models. The next generation of tooling that we'll be releasing at KubeCon North America in November does leverage them heavily. And I want to kind of talk to you about that stack, because there's a tokenomics portion of this that I think will make or break adoption, which people should know about. I believe in using the simplest algorithm to solve the problem. So our tooling, where a graph-based heuristic works, great, let's use that. Where machine learning, a traditional classifier works, let's use that. Where we need a regression model, let's use that. Where we need traditional time series analysis, my position's always been, let's use what's been proven. However, I've changed my position a little bit on that, because while you guys we're all familiar with these language models, there's another class of these foundational models for time series data, which is great for operational time series. So as an example, if I had to predict a future point in time, a value for a metric in a future point in time, I would have to model that metric. I'd have to give it historical lags to predict future lags. There's Chronos and several other foundational models that come in all different sizes. Datadog just released one that was trained on all of their operational data that allows us to have what we call zero-shot inference on time series without pre-training on customer data. And I love that. So a number of our anomaly detectors now, a number of our seasonality forecasters do use those foundational models.
That's interesting. It's I'm trying to think about how to ask this question the right way. So part of the initial value proposition, at least what people see and think about, is this optimization that you get from using your platform. And
come for the savings, stay for the automation.
Which always sort of begged a question, and it may be a naive question, but just from a pure economic standpoint, you'd think that the cloud hyperscalers there's some price equilibrium out there where they can't just continue to create a cottage industry of people who optimize on their inefficiency and friction. Now, some of that is just through customer choice and preference. It's hard to do a multi-cloud implementation of anything. And obviously, they want to capture all of your business. Is there a future optimization based on tokenization? Because that whole pricing model is different.
Yes.
And I think in 10 years, it could be the pricing for so many things as the use, the expansion of AI, grows. It's an interesting pricing scheme.
So I was really worried about this. I started thinking about this about a year and a half ago. And I want to tell you what we've built so far and where.
Does the question make sense?
It totally makes sense. Yeah. It's all going to come down to cost per input and output token.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually more existential than you think, because we're in a crossing the chasm moment, if I can just not date myself for a minute. So that difference between early adoption and real production use cases is going to come down to, I've built a great prototype, but when I try to scale it for prod, I blow the budget.
Yep.
And I think we're in this prolonged period of GPU scarcity, and that's not going to change in the short term. And I want to kind of share what I think clouds are doing with the economic model and what I think customers should be doing. Independent of CAST, here's the kind of mental model for finance that you should think about.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back for a second. I just want to address one point. Yes, cloud providers will, based on pressure from customers, they will try to come up with solutions to lower your bill. It's in their interest for the long term to not force repatriation, which is to bring software back to data centers. But there's tremendous gross margin in those businesses. We see the public reports. There's no hiding the gross margin. There are a couple of places where clouds act very monopolistically. And I'll give you a very specific example, which I think gives us every point of evidence to show that they're not going to optimize fully in the customer's best interest. The analogy I'll use is, here's the fox guarding the hen house. I'm going to optimize the dollars that I need to make sure my customers retain, not necessarily that are going to be the maximal optimal dollars. Mm-hmm. So on top of all of the technology that we deliver, and I think some of it is years ahead of what the cloud providers are even thinking about, there is an element of, you need a neutral, reliable third party across all hyperscalers that sees all of the data, that will give you the truth, the ground truth around what is the art of possible in terms of optimization. Does that kind of make sense, Lucas?
No, it makes sense, and I think there's that third party view. One way that could come about is just from the energy consumption standpoint. So existentially, beyond whatever I can spend in my IT budget, there's a question of how much energy is there to consume.
That's right. That's the final existential. But let's talk about the tokenomics piece of your question, because
yes,
it's really interesting. So you have a choice as a enterprise. Will you buy a SaaS model? Will you just, hey, let me pay for these API calls with Anthropic or OpenAI or even Grok, who's doing open source model hosting, on hardware that is specialized and really good at what it does, and I'm just hands off? And that's basically SaaS, if you think about it. But when customers want to get serious, there's a couple of things that are stopping them from using that model for everything. And I think that model is great for many use cases, but the majority of the use cases are going to be, we are not going to send our intellectual property and or customer data outside of our perimeter.
Correct.
The existing laws and regulations don't don't allow us to do that. Let's use HIPAA as an example for medical records. If I'm an insurance company, am I going to really be sending my sensitive customer information out to these? So no matter what guarantees you're given by the SaaS provider, contractually or otherwise, you are not going to send that data out of your perimeter. So that lends us naturally to saying, okay, we need to self-host in some fashion these weights and model runs. So now we're moving from pure dollars per token in out to a proxy of that, which is how much are these GPUs that I'm using for inference. And by the way, inference is the vast majority of the use cases.
Right.
No one's training in the enterprise. Anyone who says we're training our own models is full of it. I'm trying to keep it PG, Lucas. So it becomes down to a GPU cost, if that makes sense. Now, how are clouds and what we call neoclouds and GPU-specific clouds charging for GPUs? They charge by hour. And if you want to get a really good deal on these GPUs, you're going to have to commit. And the commitments are 3-year commitments. Now, here is the insanity in that argument. Mr. AWS or GCP, you're asking me to commit to 3 years for an H100, let's say. They're not giving me flexibility on, oh, when the H200 comes out and is available, I can roll my commitment.
Right.
You're stuck on a platform. Think about the rate of innovation that NVIDIA is pushing, that is only going to accelerate. We are used to this Moore's law, 18 months, doubling. It's going to look like a flat line. So if I'm buying H100s today for a 3-year period, there's a huge risk of overpaying in the long term. But the cloud provider is using that mechanism, or the financial mechanism, to cap their risk on capital expenditure. So they're pushing depreciation to customers. I think that's outrageous. So we've come up with part of our CAST platform tries to solve it. Internally, we call this Project Omni. The marketing guys will rename it by the time it gets to GA. That's fine. We're not very good namers of things. But what Omni does is, so you have a central cluster, and Kubernetes is a regional concept. You have a cluster in a specific region. US East, Ashburn, great. California, great. But there's GPUs everywhere. And there's GPUs that you can use not in the cloud of your first choice, second choice, third choice, fourth choice. And I think the scarcity problem is partially artificial based on pockets of capacity and regionality. So what we're telling customers is, don't fall into this trap of booking for 3 years. Be opportunistic, hunt for GPUs where they're available, and let's spin them up and down as you need them. And that's a 70, 80% reduction in costs. So we're looking at Oracle Cloud as an example, who I used to work for. So not directly linked to this conversation, but OCI has great GPU capacity. We're going to leverage that GPU capacity for our customers, even though they've probably never done business with Oracle Cloud in the past.
So in this, there's a whole part of this conversation that I want to move to that has to do with organizations and your experience both in large enterprise and in startups. But in the world you're describing, let's say, it is incredibly attractive to startups who are willing to move fast and take those risks. It seems really challenging to explain to procurement that is used to that long-term contractual model and has no incentive besides, strict bottom line cost. You can argue that all day, but then there's all of these other, just explaining the difference between training and inference, for example, to a non-technical person. So I'm wondering, what's the market that you capture? Is it the startup market you capture first, and that's going to eventually, create the momentum? When do you see large enterprise moving to that kind of model?
So, yeah, I think it's going to be small and scrappy companies at the beginning. There's going to be thousands of them. It's a slightly different ICP than we're going after right now. So the product in our suite is called AI Enabler, and it came out of the frustration of using these very proprietary, like you'd go to Google Cloud and you'd be in Vertex AI, and it's a completely locked and closed ecosystem. Amazon has SageMaker, Microsoft has this thing. But machine learning is one of the most prolific open source communities out there.
It's based on statistical methods that are 200 years old or more.
But the open source community is so amazing, and PyTorch and all of these things are amazing tools. Why are you locking me into this proprietary data flow stack? So our AI Enabler product was born out of that. And yes, it's working with small companies right now. But what I'm seeing is a shift in ICPs for, like, we're working with a large networking company right now, and they're looking at this model seriously because it's either a $10 million commitment for this small project, or they can prove much more. I think enterprises are moving to more agile methodology in order to be competitive with the rest of the market. You have to be agile to survive. And with that comes a lot of lean, what I'll call lean startup-like techniques. Try, fail fast, iterate. That's certainly how I worked at Oracle with a lot of my projects, and it was successful. I think you're going to see more of that behavior from large enterprise. With the GPU market specifically, I'm surprisingly seeing green shoots equally in enterprise, while we're getting a huge amount of traction and product-driven feedback on the small. I think the small guys will drive the product, and then the big guys will be there to catch it.
Yeah. Now, I think we're talking about a specific kind of enterprise too, because
Yes.
you're not talking about HSBC. You're talking about Oracle. So it's a native, digitally native company, I guess is one way to put it. It's a technology and native company. But when you think about now,
but I don't think it was 10 years ago.
Oh, tell me why. What's the shift?
Because if you think about the sales, like the sales motion, and I think it's reflective in the equity price. If you think about the sales motion, everything was very enterprise software license driven, slow cycles. First shot at Oracle Cloud did not succeed. OCI, which is what they're selling now, is V2 of that, and it's much more successful because it's based on consumption pricing, and there is no good old boy handshake. Let me buy $10 million of this from you, and then that revenue churns. So they've done a much better job at really honing in on the product that matters to those customers at a very affordable price, and that's why they're winning. So the OCI is very agile for a large company, whereas I think the way that Oracle worked 10 years ago just wasn't.
No, that makes total sense. I guess, and this is a broader sort of impact of AI question as well, is when would you anticipate that trickling down, second order, third order to the consumers of Oracle who are large enterprise, right? Which I'm assuming that some of your customers fall into that. I'm not going to say brick and mortar, but technology enabled, but not technology companies.
I'm working with a large pharmaceutical right now, and it's like a passion project for me because they do like patient simulation on drug outcomes, right? And so on premise, they can only do a certain amount of, call them virtual patients. They can do 100,000 virtual patients for a run. Takes X long. This is not what I would call a technology first company. They're a pharmaceutical business. Like their job is to, I guess, their technology from the perspective of the
digital technology.
Digital, yeah. So in order to go from 100,000 virtual patients to 10 million, what does that leave? What's the difference in scale that is required without their scientists having to significantly change their way of work? So we're seeing these green shoots of less digital native internal DNA, embracing these innovations, automation, burst to cloud, leverage GPU where you can get it in very non-traditional ways. So the original ask from that particular customer was, look, Leon, we want a kayak-like experience. We have this job we want to schedule. It's a heavy computational job. Tell us what it'll cost if we run it now with the best resources available. Or if we have the option of waiting, if our scientists are okay waiting till Sundays, a Sunday night, midnight flight, what's that going to cost us? And then let us make the decision between when we want to run it based on our cost and time sensitivity. That was the highest level ask that was super intriguing to me. It was a consumer analogy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's electricity, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. And then in terms of ways of working, just going back to, we were talking about, organizationally how engineers are adopting different, I don't know if we were recording it, but that was before we started recording the podcast. Let's go back to that because it's really super interesting. How your engineering teams are utilizing AI and how that's changing ways of working. And I'll preface this. I think it's going to be orders of magnitude larger than, but comparable to, going from waterfall to agile. And it's going to create a kind of tension where obviously it starts first. Well, I say obviously because I've been in software development, but it starts with making software. Then it spreads to other parts of the organization. So sales organizations working with an agile methodology and sprints and planning the same way, or HR or marketing. So I'm curious what your view is on that kind of adoption and change, particularly, and that's a long question, given your experience both in large enterprise, where you've seen that occurred with Agile, and now where you're having to manage that, for lack of a better word, because of all the different options with Gen AI.
So we talked about it a little bit, and I think I gave you the analogy
Yep.
of one of my engineering managers and like how I think
Which I think is great, and I'd love for you to repeat that, because I think that's great.
Yeah, I think we're recording, but I'll just
Okay.
tell the story quickly. It's like, I think that people will kind of self-select in or out
Mhm.
based on velocity. Like
Mhm.
you're just not going to be able to keep up with rockstar engineer versus rockstar engineer with using AI. You just won't. It's not fair. It's like anabolic steroids in sports.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to adopt your tools and ways of working in order to keep that top performer velocity. So having said that, here's some interesting statistics. I'm going to say something provocative now. I've asked my user experience team to stop working in Figma. And I'm going to be a very aggressive end of the year type goal. So that's a hard shift. It means much higher order thinking and a lot more automation, because we have our design system. We have the way that we lay things out. We have all our componentry. There's no need to do high fidelity mock-ups for everything that we build.
So were you surprised by the IPO then?
No, I'm not surprised in the short term. I think that Figma will iterate on their AI and get better.
Yeah.
Right now it sucks. Sorry guys, but
Yeah.
it's there's better tools for the job. Another interesting statistic, my UI team, so the people responsible for creating our experience, over 40% of that now is fully automated generation of code. We don't touch it once it's generated. It's pretty clean. By the way, that comes with unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests.
Mhm.
And so my challenge to that team is, how do we increase the coverage so you guys are thinking at a higher order? And then on the other side of the company, we're building tooling that shifts automation to the left. I'll give you a very specific example of some stuff we're releasing. But not only do we have to be believers, we have to make our customers believe. And that's a tall order. So you're thinking about, how do I make my team take that leap? And I'm thinking about, how do I make this a viable business?
Mhm.
And it's beyond vibe coding, because vibe coding always starts with a prompt. The way I'm thinking about it is there are automated processes that are unmanaged from a human perspective, or at least unmonitored, that are expected to produce a high quality outcome. How is that high quality outcome verified so that we don't introduce really large problems? Because that automation now has the ability to take action. It's not just a recommendation engine.
Right. You mentioned velocity. So everything starts with metrics, right? I find that it's been a huge challenge just because we're talking about automating things that weren't automated previously. So what's your baseline? And this is where I think there's still a lot of noise. It comes down to the right use case, and you do have to be very prescriptive, because vibe coding, I'm trying to remember the research I read last week, but something like 37% less productivity was coming out of this research because of vibe coding, because of the amount of rework that requires. It
was 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're getting more done, but you're rolling back more than you used to roll back.
Right.
But I think the net result is you're still moving forward more than you would have.
Yeah.
I look at these metrics from a human perspective, not from a. So, there's a bunch of vanity metrics. We threw those out a long time ago.
Give me an example. Where are the vanity metrics?
I'll give you the worst, shittiest ones, and then I'll go up to something that people may not think are vanity metrics.
Yeah.
Lines of code.
Yeah.
Vanity metric. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
In fact, it's an anti-pattern. The more lines, the worse you are.
It's nuanced too, right? Because you want clean, readable code.
That's right. True.
Maintainable code,
Yeah. So like,
which LLMs are great at.
which LLMs are great at, and they comment code well. They write great doc strings.
Yep.
They also write fairly elegant Pythonic code. Sometimes I don't understand it. I'm like, this is too compact for me. Give it to me in more verbose form. Like, don't do it all in one line with a lambda. Like, help my brain process what you're doing in this one line, right? But so here's another vanity metric that people might be a little bit surprised by. Code coverage, test code coverage.
Mm-hmm.
We don't measure test code coverage because what you measure is the outcome you get. You'll get a bunch of nonsense test cases that seem to cover edge cases, but they're not actually valuable. Here's what I measure. I like measuring velocity related metrics. There's a whole school of thought called DORA metrics.
Yep.
These are DevOps related.
Yep.
So I look at things like time from commit to review.
You're looking at the overall throughput.
Yeah.
Yep.
I look at rollback time as a key metric for me.
Yep.
Anything less than 30 minutes on a rollback, love it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If it can be a canary rollback where a small percentage of service traffic is affected, and then we spot the error, automatically rolled back, which we do right now with GitLab very effectively. I love that.
Yeah.
I don't like penalizing people for making mistakes. A rollback is a great thing, especially if it can be done in under 30 minutes, in my book.
Yeah.
So that's the set of things that we measure. We combine that with developer happiness. My VP of engineering hates it when I use the word happiness, but I really do think of it that way. The happier your engineers are, the much closer they'll be tied to your mission, and the much more they will lean in. So we do this survey once a quarter. It's a developer experience survey, and it looks like how much time are you wasting in your local environment? How is testing? How is our documentation? What's the onboarding experience like? It's just it's probably takes 20 minutes to fill out that survey, and then we track our weakest points on a heat map, and we focus the next quarter on using our tooling team to fix that red.
Mm-hmm.
And then we move on to the next one, and over time you get a very happy and loyal engineering team, and you measure that through unwanted attrition,
Mm-hmm.
or regrettable attrition,
Mm-hmm.
as some people call it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is going to move to a question that is totally unrelated to software development, but I did read that you practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I happen to as well.
Where do you train?
I train at a dojo in Brooklyn, New York, called Brooklyn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay.
There are a few locations. I train at one of those locations. I'm a purple belt.
What's the lineage? Who's the professor?
That's a great question. I'd say, I honestly, what I know is my professor, and I know. So Brian Glick is one of the professors of my professor.
Okay.
And I know he's trained with a whole cast of characters, including John Danaher and several people. So
New York.
Yes, yeah, New York. So next time I mention, I should probably come with more more facts in my head. But what I was thinking about as you're talking about happiness, when it comes to, I also practice Muay Thai. Just started a couple of years ago. I used to box. When it comes to performing well in sports, and particularly combat sports, being relaxed is fundamental.
Yes.
That's it. And I often feel the same way solving hard technical problems. I don't necessarily have to be happy in the classical sense. I have to be relaxed. My mind has to be relaxed. If I'm not relaxed, then I'm going to shift to lower cognitive tasks, keep myself busy. And organizationally, how that manifests itself is in a whole bunch of anti-patterns.
Yes.
People set up meetings.
Yes.
They have status reports. All of that to me represents a kind of organizational rigidity, anxiety, if you're to think about it like a living organism, that you want to unleash the productivity, and being in a relaxed state organizationally will do that. If people are operating, not operating out of fear, for example, and then we get to the whole performance metrics, the vanity metrics, a lot of those are kind of yardsticks that you can game, you can use in a threatening way. I'm creating this long preamble to what parallels do you see between your experience as a martial arts practitioner and how you approach organizational problems, how you approach technical problems?
Yeah. So just for the audience, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a relatively new sport.
Mm-hmm.
It started from Japanese. It's probably the legend is the myth is larger than the actual persona at this point, but started with a guy traveling through Europe and taking on all comers, boxers. It didn't matter what the art was; he would just fight anyone. And the legend is that he's never defeated. I think his name is Count Maeso, if I'm not mistaken. He ends up in Brazil, and a wealthy landowner named Gracie asks him to stay and train his sons, and that's where Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu kind of. And as practitioners, we are not so far removed from the founding of the sport that we should all kind of trace back to our lineages, to the original founders of the sport. I was very fortunate. I lived in LA for many years, and LA was a hot spot for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the last couple of decades, I would say. And so I started my training at a guy named Jean-Jacques Machado's academy, and JJ is a legend. So if you ever listen to Rogan, he's been on Rogan's podcast multiple times, and Joe got his black belt from Eddie Bravo, who got his black belt from Jean-Jacques. And I was privileged and fortunate enough to be able to train with JJ and his whole team in LA. So anyone ever wants to try and is in the LA area, you guys should absolutely hit up the Machado Academy. But to go back to your question on the parallels, I think it's important for people to do hard things. And BJJ is one of the hardest things you could do, in my opinion, because when you're getting choked or some 250-pound guy is on your face and you can't breathe, you're not thinking about my latest problem at work. You're not thinking about the argument I had with that individual. You're just thinking about survival. And so you get into this flow state, unlike any other, where you're just surviving in a best case scenario. And when you get better at it, you learn to control your breathing. And you learn to control your breathing when under very tenuous circumstances. Like, I'm listening to my opponent's heartbeat, to understand where and how much energy reserve that individual has. So the probability of what my outcomes might look like in my next set of moves. So I'm a brown belt. I'm not a very athletic individual, but it has saved me as a sport because it's super interesting. It's like a chess game. So I don't get bored of, I get bored of lifting weights, but I don't get bored of going to train. My next journey to black belt is going to be a long one because I have a really bad shoulder. I have to get that repaired. I want to prove to myself that I can still compete. There's just a long road. And it's mostly the races with yourself. People think of it as a combative sport. It's an inner battle, more than 99% inner battle. Because every outside skill, every opponent, once you kind of solve yourself, you can solve the externalities, if that makes sense. How do I apply, how is that important for me in the way I think about business and software in general? It used to be that engineers were not very athletic as individuals. I find that's drastically changing.
I totally agree. It used to be the Simpsons IT administrator.
Yes.
Typically overweight, sedentary.
100%. So in our office in Vilnius, we've got kickboxers, we've got swimmers, we've got triathletes, we've got mountain climbers, mountain bike. Everyone does something that engages their body because you need that release. You need that physical hard thing to do, whether it's BJJ or anything else, in order to clear your mind. And that clearness of mind leads to a lot less anxiety and then clarity of thought when you actually approach the problem solving. By the way, I agree with you that nervousness and lack of confidence manifests in bad anti-patterns. I hate meetings. I tell my team, cancel them at all costs. If you attend a meeting and you don't participate, don't join again. Like there's no, in a distributed world where flow state is super important for an engineer to be productive and happy. And I say them both, they have to be together. Meetings are the ultimate anti-pattern. Imagine you have just three meetings in your day. You will not achieve flow state in that day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's reminds me of the famous blog post by Paul Graham.
Yep. Yeah, it's.
I think maker time versus manager time.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder how incorporation of AI into some of the harder tasks, which I'm still, I wouldn't say skeptical. I know everything is solvable. There's an equilibrium at some point, but I wonder how that's going to, for example, maybe allow better orchestration of that hard cognitive stuff in organizations, how that can, maybe expand that time. But also to your point about physical activity and how, Mark Zuckerberg now is an example.
Oh, he jumped on late, dude. He jumped on late. But he is pretty good. Like I did watch. He has a couple of matches. I watched. It's pretty good.
Yeah. It'd be fun to spar with him.
Yeah,
I'm sure a lot of people say that. But I wonder, when you're doing something like, and I'm going to make a certain division because I used to run a lot, and running is, to me, is more like a task that could be automated than an intellectually challenging task, because you're really just calming a certain level of discomfort over time, and you lose yourself in other things. So running is used to be a good way for me to maybe chew on a complex problem where I know no one's going to bother me because, hey, I'm out for a run.
But you're not really meditating, are you?
I tried meditation, and I. Yeah, it's a whole topic, but
I'm saying in the run, like when you get into that state.
Yeah.
One perspective is it's a meditative state. You're just
right.
Repetitive. By the way, I don't know how to run very well at all, and that's one of the things that I want to try to get better at. Just there's a whole technique to it that I think is missed on the average spectator, right? But I would so like when you're in a tough spot on the mat, you don't have time to think about that problem you're solving.
Right.
And I think that's meditative.
Yeah.
Versus a run, whereas you get into that, your body's in that repetitive motion, your brain is free to go anywhere.
Correct. And I think it's a very important distinction. And that's where I find a lot of parallels between jiu-jitsu and solving a complex technical problem. You can't boil the ocean. And that's the first mistake people
Correct.
tend to make, is that they try to implement something without thinking through the problem correctly or sufficiently. If you try to rush to a technique, and this is a typical,
Yep.
and I'm trying to sort this. I'm a purple belt, so I'm still in that. It's a journey, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't long ago that I was rushing to do things without going through each step, where you have to kind of. Rock climbing is a great parallel or a great metaphor as well. You just have to think about the little thing you're doing first to solve a complex problem. You have to break it into very discrete steps, because if you try and do it all, you're going to gas out, and you're never going to get the outcome that you're looking for. So that to me is
you look for the little things. Okay, I'm in a tough spot. Where are my frames? Where's leverage?
right.
How much gas do I have in the tank? How much time is left on the clock?
Before I let go of this point of control, do I make sure I have another firm point of control?
And then those things become very instinctual, and then you start thinking of second and third order reaction times.
Correct.
And okay, and you don't think about those. Like you automatically know, I'm gonna push the body that way. He's gonna post out. The opening will be there. So those things are learned. But I want to take that back all the way to your question around where the value is for
Yes.
individuals. You just learn patience, and you learn not to rush, and you learn to dissect problems. Sometimes the best ideas I've ever had have been right after a hard roll. Like I have to grab my phone and I got to record this thought because and it didn't come during the roll. It just came in the moment of clarity when you're relaxing and you're breathing, and then some of those problems that you couldn't solve throughout the day come flooding back to you.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's a solution.
Which is why I'm skeptical about any kind of AGI looking like a human intelligence. And I think people confuse the two. And again, cinema has, we have very fantastic ways of thinking about it because that's very human. And I don't know if there's no easy scientific technical explanation as to how that thought came to you after physical exertion solving something else.
Well, let me challenge you a little bit on
Please.
that. Right? So let's just do this thought experiment, right? If we're really just a bunch of neurons connected with different weights and that go through a cognitive network, those inputs are still there, right? And in our case, we have chemical barriers, right? Like we just don't have enough dopamine to want to do the task, or we're too anxious, so there's not enough of whatever hormone there's a hormone imbalance basically that's preventing us from wanting to try or trying, or there's some other mental blocker. That physical exertion, what it does is it temporarily unleashes those gates, but the neurons are still there, and all they have to do is be allowed to connect to an answer. The way I would equate that to kind of an LLM analogy is you have to ask the right question or set of questions with the right tools to get to a solution. I hear people saying AI doesn't work for me, or it can't become an effective tool in my life. And I would say, look at your prompts. Your prompt engineering sucks. Like you're either too low level, or you're either being too dogmatic or too prescriptive in what you're asking, or you're being so fluffy that the machine doesn't even know where to start with your thoughts.
Yeah.
You have being in the middle is an art.
Yeah. I forget what I was going to prompt the other day, but I found myself going through so many iterations in my head of what I was supposed to prompt to get to the best question possible.
Yeah.
And it's a real challenge. I think it's an interesting skill that my children, for example, are going to natively be better at than previous generations, just because that's becoming part of their lives. And anyone getting in the way of that from an educational standpoint, it's a huge challenge.
I worry that a little bit for kids. When did you start coding, Lucas?
I guess it was second grade, making games for Commodore 64.
Okay, so maybe we're like close in the same ballpark. I think I was 9, and my first computer was an Apple IIe. Right?
Okay.
I mean, those are thousands of hours that we've put in to those quote unquote games or whatever we were building back then. Mm-hmm. My favorite was text adventure games like Zork.
Oh yes,
love those. All of that background and thousands of hours is lending to the way we think about prompt engineering today. It's like our mental model of the world, and the way that computers work is all embedded in the way we ask questions. When you have a younger person who hasn't necessarily gone through that toil or those thousands of hours, are they capable of asking questions in the same way? Do they even have their own context set up in such a way that they're capable of asking the right questions? It's kind of one of my, I won't call it doomsday, but like one of the negative paths that I see is where we as a society get so stupid that we don't even know how to use the AI effectively anymore.
Yeah.
So that's something that I worry about from the young person's perspective.
I totally agree, and I see both doomsday and utopia.
Yeah.
Doomsday is I'm going to use this example. I've used it before, but I spend 20 minutes and create a 50-page business plan, right? And it's good enough. that's going to be read by LLMs and analyzed by LLMs. So I'm creating this big block of content that'll then be decomposed by the same model that created that content.
Yep.
So what are we actually transmitting? Where's the idea? Where's the kernel in that?
Yeah.
The noise will of that.
That's a great point. You know, like when you use these LLMs to generate docs, they come with all kinds of marketing fluff and this word alignment, which I hate, and crucial and strategic. My prompts strip all of that out. I ask it to get to very basic, simple English language, no more than high school ideas. Everything you should be able to. If I have 3 or 4 ideas that I want to get into a one-pager, it should be a very simple transformation just to give enough context and background around those 4 bullets, and that's it.
So there's something very much Zen mind, beginner mind about that too, which is why for our children who don't have all the context that we just have over the years and intuition, maybe they'll come to that, you know, from a totally naive standpoint. And that's one thing I've learned just experimenting with vibe coding, is that there's kind of a middle area where you really screw things up if you introduce anything that isn't sort of very simple to that core idea. You just create a bunch of other stuff. You create cruft all over the place.
But vibe coding is no different. You don't create unit tests. You don't create a good CI/CD pipeline. You will end up in the same crappy legacy code, non-refactorable code that you would if you did it by hand. It would just take you would just get the failure much faster.
Well, precisely. Yeah, and that's why I think a great use case is throwaway code.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to throw spaghetti at the wall, there's no better way to do it.
I love Lovable for that. Have you used it?
Yeah, I just started. Yeah.
I mean, now when I write a product definition and I want to envision a UI that looks like our console, it's a 30-minute problem.
Yeah.
And it's getting better, and I don't know how they're making money at $25, but we'll take advantage of it while it's there.
That goes back to the economics question previously.
Yeah.
This has been a ton of fun. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you for the great questions, Lucas. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
This was it for this episode. Join us next time for more real-world conversations between technology leaders. And if you like what you heard, subscribe to CTO2CTO. See you soon.